All right. Random episode discussion that we're going to have today is just kind of our breeding plans for the season, what we're noticing in the breeding room, all that good stuff. So, Nathan, how many pairings do you have planned for this season?
So if I really wanted to push it, I could do 3, but just to be safe with one of my females, I'm going to do 2 this year.
What do you mean be safe?
I have a female that's just coming up on age, about 4.5 years old, and she's just stayed really, really small, especially compared to my 2 other females. So I'm just going to give her another year to mature, make sure her body tone looks where I'm comfortable pairing her, and then I'm ready to go. But if I'm not comfortable with how she looks, I'm not going to throw a male to her.
How is, is she showing any signs of, wanting to ramp up food or anything like that?
I mean, she's always got a good food response, but no, nothing compared to the 2 females that I'm trying to cycle right now.
Oh, okay.
Her food response is pretty
So
it's to what
okay,
it's always
yeah,
been.
Cool. I mean, I'm a firm believer that regardless of what we try to do to manipulate whatever they want, that they're going to breed when they are ready. A good example is my Coyote female who just laid. She was no bigger than she was earlier last season. And I tried breeding her last season when she was over 3.5 years old, but a little under 4, and started ramping up her food, and she just didn't go. She had the size, right? But she just didn't go. And so I took her off of food, of a little increase of heavier feeding, and just waited. And then kind of started that process over again. And she decided to go this year. Right. And like I said, no big difference in her size or maturity, maybe sexual maturity. Sure. But I'm a firm believer that just when they're ready, they're going to go. Right. Even if we try to force them to go early, it usually ends up not happening, or most of the time probably end up with a bad clutch.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not going to change anything as far as her feeding schedule. I didn't do a drought period or anything like that to try to throw her into any kind of cycle. But I know if you're doing normal feeding, sometimes they can still cycle if they're ready. So if I notice her go off food and see the signs of wanting to pair, then I'll throw a male to her. But I just really doubt I'm going to see that this year.
Can you explain to our listeners? I know we talked about it in one of our earlier episodes, but what do you mean by drought feeding?
So generally I'm feeding my females that are about adult size, about 14 to 17 days, every 14 to 17 days. I'll extend that just a little bit for a month or 2 to about just a feeding that leaves a smaller lump about once a month.
Okay.
And then after that, I'll do that maybe for 2 feedings, and then I'll go into some heavier feedings where I'm, instead of feeding every 14 or every 17 days, I'm feeding every 14 days.
Okay, so just to recap, and so a drought in feeding is literally giving them the snake this psychological thought of there is less food than usual, and offering food once a month in a smaller meal to get them to kind of increase that food drive for it. And then after that, hitting them with a larger or more frequent meals to give them the psychological aspect of oh, there's a surplus of food. And that is your theory of, or a theory of, getting them to cycle and feel like it's a good time to start building some follicles.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, there's some people in my first mentor who just feeds normally year round, and his females cycle or they don't cycle.
Yeah.
And he's had good luck just doing it that way. So, there's not a complete science to this thing.
No. And it really comes down to knowing your animals and I mean, sometimes, to be honest, just luck. Of whether a snake wants to go a certain season or not. You could do everything that people think is right and it work out, and then you could do everything that people think is right and it just not work out. But what I'm hearing though is that you're erring on the side of caution because your female still seems a little bit small and you just want to be more careful.
That, and I'm in my first few seasons, and I'm always just going to play the safe than sorry route.
Yeah, that's not a bad way to do that. For those of you tuning in, if you guys are actually wanting some breeding support, this is your first year, go ahead and join our Patreon. Nathan and I are also somewhat new at breeding between the both of us combined. This is both of our third season, so we have 6 years of experience combined, which is very, very early in our breeding stage, but we've both been able to pump out successful clutches and have been able to get females to cycle well. So we want to help you guys that we are just maybe a few steps ahead of you and want to, we're not very far removed of the difficulties of breeding and just kind of the nuances and the new stuff. So join our Patreon. And for those of you also listening on Spotify or Apple Music, make sure to follow, rate those episodes. And if you'd like to join us on video, go ahead and subscribe to the Retic Lounge. Throughout this video, go ahead and comment, like, subscribe. We're happy to have you guys here. So, Nathan, so tell me a little bit about the pairings that you have, and then I'll go into kind of what my breeding season looks like here.
Yeah, so running 2 females, mine should be pretty quick just because everything shares genetics, kind of. So I have a 2016 purple albino het anery from Eric Lee. She's 75% Kalatoa, 12.5% Jampea. I believe she traces back to Retic stock. I'm going to be pairing her to my Phantom Tiger. He's a 62.5% Kalatoa. So we'll still have some nice high percentage Kalatoa babies, just a tiny bit of Jampea sprinkled in there. And then he's also Pos Het for albino. So I'm really hoping that we can hit some albino Phantom stuff this year. Garrett said there's a really slim chance that he would be het anery. I'm not counting on that at all, but hit the odds gods kind of a thing, and we could be looking at snow
Yeah,
phantoms.
I got a buddy of mine, Paul, that had some animals from Bob Clark, and with no sign of being het for albino or anything, and just wasn't even expecting it, and landed albinos in a recent clutch that he had. So, sometimes if there's like a long line of history of the pos hets, there's always still a pos chance, right?
I think the chance of him being albino is a little bit higher than the anery for sure, just with previous pairings with what produced him. But doing that, and then also
Hold on.
pairing up to my...
Before you go on to your next one, I just want to say that I think Super Dwarf Phantom albinos is going to be sick. I'm excited to see that. It's surprising. I don't think we've...
I was going to give you plenty more time to talk about them because that's what I'm shooting for.
That's insane. And I think about it, and I'm trying to think: have I seen someone post a high percentage, or even a 50% or 62.5%, Super Dwarf Phantom albino? And I can't recall any.
Not that I can think of offhand. I know there's a lot of Phantom pairings being done right now. But yeah, great small genetics. Both these females are really nice and small. So the purple, she's just a touch over 9 foot, maybe 12, 15 pounds, something like that. She's not too heavy. So the other female that I'm going to run, she shares the same genetics, 75% Calitoa, 12.5% Jampea, traces back to the same line. Got her from Richard Bilbo. She's an Anery Poshet albino. So I'd like to prove out her Poshet. Obviously, I would need him to prove Poshet as well, but, you know, at least get some really cool het stuff in there. At least phantom het Anery, phantom het albino, that kind of thing. If
I think that's going to be a really fun project to see that phantom albino stuff. That's exciting.
Yeah, so if you want to get into snow phantoms, these babies could be pretty cool.
Man, a snow phantom. That would almost be like if you can hit some of those high white snows that I've seen around. Like I think someone who's usually into mainlands just got I think it's maybe Shane. But I think he just landed a snow that is like ridiculously white. But could you imagine the phantom markings of a like lighter yellow white snake with the snow and having the like light purplish, phantom pattern? Yeah, I think that's cool. Going to be an awesome animal. I like that project a lot. What like behavior changes do you notice during breeding season that you're going through right now that's fun?
So the purple, she gives it to me easy. I don't have any kind of big behavioral changes. Yeah, she's definitely looking for food more, but I can interact with her in about the same way I do year round. The Anery though, she gets a little bit more heightened during this time. So I could feed her a big old rabbit, give her a nice lump, and go in to clean her cage 2 days later, get the pee out, and she's huffing and puffing. She'll buck me. She's just uncomfortable during this time, and doesn't really want to be messed with. Just wants to eat, digest, and get ready.
I think uncomfortable is a really good word. My Coyote was like that this first season, her breeding. Anytime like I could like blow wind on her and she'll just like flex her whole body, snap up, and never once struck at me, never once was like mean or anything, but was just like, please leave me alone. And I'm like, but you're sitting in a bunch of crap. I gotta clean your cage. Like, I'm over here.
So if you go back and you go onto my Instagram, I don't know if there's a way we can edit this in really quick.
You're testing my skills here, but I'll give it a shot. Adler.
Oh, that's
we'll definitely try Adler. Okay.
But anyways, I posted a little reel of just throwing her back in the cage the other day, and just as I'm like leading her back into the cage, you can see her kind of bump and like go quickly into the cage for a second. And that's about what I'm talking about. She'll get vocal too. Like I said, she'll give long huffs
those
of air,
deep breaths.
She'll let you know, hey, just like, come on, just like,
right,
let's be over. But every time she gets back in that cage and she realizes, oh, I got clean water, clean paper.
Right.
she's very appreciative every time, and looking to be cleaned right now. So I'm sure she'll let me know that she's not too happy to be taken out. But
I feel like my Solaire, my pure Solaire female, is the same way. And I haven't had her for many years. So like I ended up receiving her last year, and she was already gravid. And she was like that, but clearly she was gravid. But then I noticed this year, as I was putting more weight on her, trying to get her up to weight, she went off of food. And as soon as she went off of food, same thing. I touch her with a hook and she would just, not want to be messed with. She'd go up on her huge shelf. And when she's up on that shelf, getting a 14-foot snake off of a shelf that has a lip to it is like, at that point, she wins. I clean the bottom of it, and then whenever I keep an eye on her and I see her on the bottom is when I'll just grab her and clean the top off after. So, but yeah,
So there is one downside to those really, really nice shelves that you have
Yeah,
designed.
like and I talked to Mark about like, hey, can we get them with no lip? And he's like, no, the lip is part of the support on the side. That
It's
yeah, it's like
integral.
you gotta have that lip. So what I try to do to make up for it is I just pack it really heavy with Repti chip all the way to the top so that it kind of makes up for it. But if they don't want to come out, they just throw the Repti chip everywhere. So um,
I wonder if you could just have Mark cut you just a custom piece that fits right into that space.
oh,
So it just fills the gap.
that's actually not a bad idea.
I mean, I'm sure he has a little spare PVC from all the
Oh yeah,
scraps and stuff. So it's a
yeah.
possibility. Just an idea I'm throwing out there.
Mark, if you're listening to it, give me a call.
But what do I know? I haven't built a single cage besides just throwing some
Right.
screws into some PVC.
Um, so, so yeah, I mean, I noticed the same things. A lot of my female, so like my wild caught Kalatoa is like the opposite. She becomes a total sweetheart. Like for like the entire year that she doesn't go off of food, and after she's laid, she's a monster when it comes with wanting to eat, and she's always just difficult to work with when she has that kind of feeding response 24/7. But I've always been able to tell throughout the 3 years that I've had her. Well, this is the third season that I've had her. She is when she's getting close, she becomes a total sweetheart. Like she's a snake that I literally I have before. I don't make a habit of it, but I had my helper over and I opened up the cage and I put my hand on top of her. She's that puppy dog tamed during this.
Yeah.
Like I know that something's up with her and she's building follicles when she just her mood completely changes and she's a sweetheart to work with. And so, yeah, I think just us talking about that is actually just a good point for people getting into breeding. It's just like the number one thing you could do is just watch out for any type of behavioral changes. Some do it, some don't. But if you notice a big behavioral change around cooler months, or if you're increasing feeding, there's a chance that they might be going through those motions.
I want to hit on behavioral change since you brought it up uh, with your
Yeah.
males. So last year I was unsuccessful in my pairings, and it's most likely due to the fact that I was working with a male that was about 18 months old. He had some decent size to him, looked like he potentially could pair, but he wasn't showing some of the signs and attitude that I was seeing from the other male that I had worked with in the past. Now, the other male that I'd worked with in the past was a bit of an exception. He was just a fun snake to deal with all around. But even within that year between then and now, he's become a totally different snake. You can just see him reacting to things in the room different, smelling the air different. He's just much more active. So I have much higher hopes for him this year. I haven't done any intros yet, but I just have a lot higher hopes just based on his activity
Yeah.
level. And when I'm interacting with him, it's a little bit different. I'm having to watch him just a tiny bit more. I can just sense that he's looking for something
Yeah.
right now.
That's a good way to put it. My males, so one thing that I notice across the board with all of them that are breeding mature, and that I would say all of my males that are 2.5 years or older, they become pacers in their enclosures. And I will say that like handling them, I had a wild caught Kalatoa, and he was like your stereotypical male breeder season combative type of snake with me. Like bucked me, kind of would do those deep breaths and hiss, didn't like to the point where like it was safe for me to make sure he was on top of the female's enclosure. So I just opened both doors and guided him in. That was my way of doing it the safest way possible, just because I had gotten him out before during breeding season and he's doing this one. Right. And this is not a very big snake or anything, but he was not very fond of me during breeding season. And so I managed it that way. But I would say a wild caught retic is probably exception to most of what you see in captive bred animals. Like, I think most people are aware of like males can be dangerous. In my experience, none of my males that I have right now ever make me nervous. I think I make myself more nervous, because
Yeah.
the one thing I notice is they pace more. And then when I go to get them out, they might be just like the females, more sensitive to the hook and kind of just like do this. But once I have them out, um, they're pretty, like I have an F1 Philippine, that is like a total like sweetheart. It's really weird. Like, and I have a bunch of females like in my garage that we're cycling and are cycling right now. And I thought that I would have to be a little bit more on guard, and again, I don't ever get complacent. But
Yeah.
surprisingly, my males have been fairly easy to work with. Now my Kalatoa, TK Kalatoa, that is 2.5 years old, he kind of was showing the same signs that your male that was 18 months was doing. And I think that might be just his size. I don't know, but he did not show the major arching or anything like that some of my other males that were older or larger would do. But to the point where like I knew my female Kalatoa was building follicles. She was off of food and I'd put him in and he would be on the complete opposite side of the 6 foot enclosure. And so I decided to put her in the very large ARS rack. And that was when I put him in, and that was his rack that I have for him, and I put her in there. And that was when I started opening the rack and seeing them cuddling and tails close together. And so I think it was a confidence thing for him of just feeling very vulnerable in a large enclosure.
And people are going to hear racks and retics and be like, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" But people have to understand these ARS racks that Lucas is using is almost as big as a lot of the PVC.
It's almost 6 foot long.
Some people have.
Yeah, he literally takes up giant. Like a tiny bit of the corner, has the rest of the rack. I have 2 hides in there, and I have like a little PVC thing for him on there to climb. I mean, he's got. I believe he has room to use the little bit of height that the racks have. I think they're like a foot tall. And he's able to, he has the 2 hides that he sits on top of. He has a PVC thing that he climbs on. And yeah, it's like, I mean, he's still, he's 5 feet in an almost 6 foot, it's longer than he is his length. So, yeah, but no, sorry, that's okay. I mean, I appreciate that because people will be like, why are you keeping your snake in racks? They're big racks. So yeah, when I did that, I noticed that he would spend more time with her. And again, the rack's big enough where she covers one side. He has like 3.5 feet of room to be nowhere near her if he wanted to. And he still chose to lay up with her. And so now I think she actually, I didn't notice an ovulation or lock, but she is really, really big, and she just shed. So we'll see. About that, I'll just go into my pairings that I'm doing.
Yeah, what are you doing this year?
So
how many to start?
If everything works out perfectly, which it won't, I could potentially by like February, I could potentially have 5 or 6 females going.
Okay.
And so I'm actually in the process of having to buy a large hatchling rack, because if I do have 4 to 6 of those females going, I probably am going to have like 60 or plus babies.
Okay, so let's start with your Coyote since we have eggs on the ground.
So she was a F1 paired with an F1 Coyote from Theron Lance over at Grassroots Reptiles. I was really excited to do that breeding partnership with him. And I'll go ahead and just share the information that I'm really excited about. There was this like rumor mill from the original breeder of the wild caught animals that they produced an anery looking Coyote that was without a doubt anery. And so he was saying, that the babies from both clutches, since they were from the same wild caught parents, were Pos Het Annery, and I, at the time just was like, okay, cool. Like I wasn't gonna count on it, but then Brian Farley did a pairing with a sibling to my female, of her sister, to an 87.5% platinum Annery Kalatoa, and made Annery babies. So I was like, okay, so Annery Coyotes are a thing. So Theron's male is a year younger, but from the same wild caught pairing. And so we might be producing visual. I mean, it's a long shot. They're both Pos Hets, but we could be producing what people would see as Annery Coyote. So that's really, really exciting. So that's one pairing. That eggs are on the ground. My Slayer female has done some weird inverting, but she's also a very weird animal that I got from Reach Out Reptiles. She's just a very lean animal and is extremely hard to read with breeding season. And then plus, ask anybody who's worked with Slayers. They're just as hard to get to breed successfully as Sulawesi's are. They're not, for some reason, Slayers are just notoriously a little bit more difficult to breed, and maybe that's the Saputrii that's the difference in them, and we don't really understand them, and we're treating them like your standard retic, and maybe there are some temperature differences. But I have her paired with Eric Lee's 87.5% Kalatoa Platinum Annery. Another surprise Annery clutch that might be happening. My female comes from like a long lost bloodline of what used to be called Mercury before like Annery was a thing. That Retic.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, Retic Ranch had just a pair of wild caught animals that he bred, wild caught Slayers that he bred and produced these Mercury animals. And so what was cool was Chris McVicker paired he paired two siblings together that those animals came from my female Slayer a while back, and doing that pairing produced an Annery looking animal. So I hit up Eric and I was like, hey, I don't have an Annery male and would like to have something high percentage. And Eric was super on board. And so she's again off of food. She did a weird invert a couple days ago. Again, not an ovulation I witnessed, but you know, so that's going to be like the Kalatoa. If I get eggs, cool. If I don't, it is what it is.
Did you get confirmed locks
I
on
saw
that pairing?
tails intertwined, and the male was like really trying hard when I was first doing intros. He was moving around her, doing his thing. He's a very good breeder, and
Spurring and
doing all
that.
Never saw like lock to lock where I felt 100%, but I have a picture of his tail wrapped around the bottom of her, but I couldn't see her vent, couldn't see his vent. And then she shed about 2 weeks after that. And now I have the male in there right now, and she's on the shelf and he's on the bottom, completely uninterested. So maybe, or maybe she's throwing a Partho clutch or maybe she's not even gravid. That's the weird thing about her, is she's really hard to tell. So if that's the case, that would produce 43.75% Kalatoa, 50% Slayer, Platinums, Normals, all 100% Het Annery, and then if the morph gods are in my favor or in our favor, we'll produce visual Annery and Platinum Anneries. Especially with Slayer. Like I cannot, number one, even if she doesn't, I can't wait to see what the Platinum with the Slayer influence does. It's going to be pretty awesome. So that's 3 so far. I have my F1 Philippine girl that I'm working with Rodney on. Rodney was amazing and sent me a pair of Philippines to work with, and we cut out a deal to where they're by animals, but we are agreeing to do pairings, and there are going to be some partnership pairings for her first couple clutches, and she is slowing down massively with her food response, and I palpated her the other day and felt about 16 lumps. And so she seemed a lot further along than I thought. For those of you that...
And how big is this F1
she's
Philippine girl?
9 feet.
Okay, cool. So she's nice and
Yeah,
small.
I mean, Rodney's a big believer that the southern Philippines. She's from Mindanao and like a southern Philippine, like is a little
Yeah.
island off the mainland that, um, they don't get as big as the northerns that you see a lot of the tribal stuff in. But we have limited information on that, so they could end up a medium sized retic or they could be monsters. But he has wild caught and some F1 grown ups, and I think the wild caught female's 13 feet. Um,
So yeah, pretty medium, almost the layer
yeah.
size.
So I have a couple of options that I could do with her. I'm leaning more heavily on one, but I'd like for you guys to drop comments down below what you guys think. I want to pair by TK male Kalatoa, so I can use the Philippine color, those oranges and silvers and reds, and add color that some of the Kalatoas lack oftentimes, while shrinking down the animal sizes, and use, have a 50% Philippine, 50% Kalatoa baby. And so technically, because of the industry standard, they would be considered super dwarfs because they're 50%. And then, hopefully this medium size Southern Philippine, I think that those are going to make some manageable size, not small, but manageable size retics that I think would be a good investment for people that want to see more color in the super dwarf stuff that they can then take to morphs. Sorry, getting my laptop charger. Realized it wasn't plug in. And then I have another option of putting a 50% Tom Long and Phantom with her.
Okay, so that's also really nice. A lot of good color on both of them.
I think the babies would look outstanding. The only trade-off there is size. Now we're going from what would be 50% Super Dwarf, 50% Philippine to now 25% Tombolongan, which is already a debate if it's a Super Dwarf or not. Super Dwarf or Dwarf.
Yep.
People in the UK say Super Dwarf. But so now it would only be 25% that and 50% Philippine. But I think they would produce really phenomenal looking phantoms.
I think if you're asking me personally, the TK boy sounds more appealing.
Me too.
It is reminiscent almost of the Ternate Kalatoa crosses that Rodney's doing, and those are some of my favorite crosses I've ever seen as far as locality retic cross goes.
And me being just like a locality nerd, and that's what I love. I do want to play with crossing, all these, I have 8 localities. And so I do want to plug and play and cross and play and see what wild types that I can really bring out while trying to just, I have the Coyote and the Kalatoas and a Jamp, an Anery Jamp. That's a baby, but down the road that I can use to kind of work with reducing size with some of the other localities that I have. And yeah. So yeah, that's the 4th pairing. 5th pairing that I have is not like a super door pairing. This is like a strictly business pairing. I have my Ocelot male that I got from Aubrey Pruitt. And he is 66% Pos Het Indo Caramel. And so Rodney sent me over a mainland tiger female that she's a proven breeder. She's 6 years old. She had her first clutch last season. And she's a tiger, 100% Het Indo Caramel. So he's going to be paired to her. And if that goes well, the goal there is to be able to prove him Het Caramel. Because if he does prove Het Indo Caramel, that's going to change my entire scope of what I use him for my Super Dwarf stuff moving forward. If I can confirm that, then that's a game changer. So,
that's a smart but also a long play as far as what you can do with him. I mean, a lot of people getting into Super Dwarf breeding and also the Ocelot project, they want to automatically just shrink down. But if you have hets and you can prove out those hets first, That's almost
Yeah.
a better play.
Yeah. So that's the goal there. So I'm gonna be using him with my other locality stuff. But if I can prove him out early on, which was kind of the idea with this, I mean, and if I can get a mainland male that it's a visual tiger Indo caramel 100% het ocelot. Ocelots are known for having some pretty good visual markers on their hets. So I could take that male to, a Calato or whatever the case may be and try to spot out the, ocelot markers and try to, cheat and have some shortcuts to eventually make 50% super dwarf tiger caramel ocelots.
Yeah, but you're still talking multi-generational breeding.
Yeah. Anytime you're working with double recessives, it's a long game. Yeah, for sure. And then, so that was the fifth that I mentioned. Yeah, that was the fifth that I mentioned. And then the sixth is probably going to be a 2023 pairing that I'm ramping her up now. But my ternate female is about 3.5 years old. So I'm going to be getting her ready to go. Hopefully turn of the year, she's ready. And it was really hard for me to make this decision, but I think I'm most excited to see what a ternate ocelot looks like. So ocelot male is going to be going to her. And so again, not a very tiny project, but my whole goal of getting the ocelot was with all the female pure localities I have. I really just want to selectively breed for what locality is going to produce the coolest looking ocelots. And I secretly think it's going to be ternate. So, or Halmahera, but I'm a long way out from getting my little 3-month-old Halmahera female ready. So yeah, those are the 6. So 5 pairings will happen in 2022. The 6 will happen early 2023 if she shows those signs. But yeah, so going from only 1 clutch the last 2 years to now planning breedings for 4 to 5 animals has been very exciting, but also very, it's a lot. It's a lot to remember, a lot to keep track. It's a lot of food.
Well, and I think you're really on top of all of your husbandry, especially during breeding time, making sure everything's meticulous, making sure you're taking notes of everything you're doing. So yeah, it's a lot more work when you're adding even 1 or 2 more snakes into that mix. Yeah. So I could imagine.
Yeah. I think the one that I'm looking forward to the most is the one that I just did, which is the Coyote, that the eggs are on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, not a lot of people are able to successfully breed Coyote, and there hasn't been pures in a little while.
Yeah.
So nice.
Samson Pruitt produced a pure clutch in 2018 and then 19, and then Garrett did his in 2020. But those are the 3 pairings each of those years that I think prior to that, it'd been probably almost 10 years.
Yeah, 3 clutches in the entire U.S. Try to find something on Morph Market right now.
That's it. So, but aside from just the rarity of that, is that she was the first Retic I got. So she was born in February. I got her May of that year. So I've had her since she was 3 months old. And so I've really got to just raise this tiny little snake that fit in the palm of my hand. And now I got that experience of seeing her lay on a clutch and pull that clutch. And now that clutch is looking beautiful. Yep. It was a very, just whole. I'm going to want to hold back every single baby, but, that it's, but no, I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, I think that's one of my most exciting pairings for you this season too. I'm really excited to see what those babies look like. Just what's to come with that clutch. Who ends up getting into that project? What your holdbacks end up looking like. If the head anery thing proves out, that'll be amazing.
I'll tell you right now, if the head anery proves out and we have aneries between me and Theron, I'd be shocked if we make one of those available. And
Oh
then
yeah.
everything else will probably be up for sale. If we don't hit the anery, that's okay. That doesn't mean that either of our animals are not het. That just means that one of them wasn't. So there'll still be chances for me to prove that out later. But I think each of us are probably going to hold back about 2 animals and let the rest go. Is that your cat in the background? Invite him in.
Yeah.
I like when he sits on your lap. What's up, buddy?
He's so needy. Hey, come up here. And loud.
So yeah, I mean that's what I have planned this year, and I'm in the process of buying another large hatchling rack that, just in case everything goes well, and if it doesn't, I at least have room to grow and have plenty of rack space, to grow and yeah, I mean out of all the pairings that I'm doing, I'm not gonna lie, I'm still more excited to see possibly albino phantoms.
Hey, yeah, that'd be pretty cool to see. The Phantom Project for me, of course, is chasing the white snake, the cow project, long term. But obviously, just working with the snow projects that I have, I think it'd be cool to eventually do some snow phantom stuff down the line too.
Yeah, I think that, and what's crazy is snow has been around for so long. It's been around for a good while, and we're just now seeing more influx of, I know Eric Lee is leading the way in a lot of morph snows.
Snow
King.
King. Bow down.
I'm surprised it hasn't made its way into more codowns, but then again, I mean, even just like these super dwarf phantoms, they're all over the place now, but I mean, realistically, you could only get your hand on one probably 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's really exciting stuff. We talked a little bit about breeding changes in the room, a little bit about drought feeding, males and females behaviors. Our
Temperature changes. So like also, especially here in Utah, when it hits kind of that autumn fall time and our temperatures start to change, that's when I'm noticing these changes in my females as well. It's not just when I'm starting to feed them heavy. I don't know why I didn't touch on that earlier, but right now we're dropping probably 20, 30 degrees cooler in the night than we were trending a month or two ago. That combined with storms rolling in, barometric pressure changes, I think that has a lot to do with some of the attitude I get in some of the breeder females and even the male.
Yeah. I'm glad that you mentioned that. I'm going to kind of just give my 2 cents on that and why that's super important. So, can you breed retics year round? Yeah, you can. Can you solely induce clutches of retics by increasing food? Yes, you can. There's people that do that. However, if you're a first time or a second time breeder, my biggest recommendation is really get to understand where you live and what the temperatures are like, when the rainy season is, when the temperatures start to drop, because that is going to significantly help. So females like it to be cooler when they're in the process of building follicles. If follicles get too hot, you can ruin those follicles, and that, too warm of an environment when a female's building follicles can lead to her not fertilizing those eggs or follicles properly, and can result in unfertilized eggs or slugs or a number of reasons. And when I did my only pairing during, actually no, I did 2. So 2 of my female Calotoa, my wild-caught Calotoa pairings was when I was doing the gradient temperatures. And I would, when those temperatures would drop at night in my house, I would actually I would want the house to be cold where the snakes were. Your snakes are going to do fine if it gets in the 70s. That's no problem for them. They're not going to wake up with an RI. They're a little bit more tough than Burms are. But with with that being said, cold weather is what actually helps them when it changes to the rainy season in Indonesia. The temperatures drop a bit, and that is their breeding season. So what works for me here in Texas is not going to be the same for what works with, what's your name? Nathan. For what works with Nathan in Utah, it's not going to be the same for what works for Garrett in Pittsburgh and what works for Eric Lee in California. And it's different, and you really need to understand where you live. But the key behind it is when you go through that season change of summer hot weather and then it starts to get rainy towards the end, or when it gets rainy and your nights start to get cooler, those are the times that you want to start looking out for behavioral changes and maybe start increasing food a little bit more to get the female in the mindset of like, okay, rainy season, it's cooler. I can build follicles. There's plenty of food nearby that I can eat and get what I need in order to breed, because it takes a huge toll on them. So they need to know that they have the surplus of calories, to do that. Me keeping an ambient right now, I'm running like an 81.5 to 84.5 to 85, basically year round. But like, I even noticed like the temperatures dropped a few weeks ago, just real quick, when we had a really big spur of really hot days and hot nights. At nights it got cooler and it rained a few times, and I'm over here 2-3 weeks later palpating my Philippine female, and she's got huge follicles. So even in a controlled environment like ambient, the external barometric pressure in the atmosphere, in the air, and the cool temps makes a big difference.
And do you guys have a big humidity fluctuation during this time of the year?
In San Antonio, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it, like when we were just on our hot spurt during the summer, humidity is 30 to 40% outside. And then once fall hits, even if we don't have a super rainy fall, once fall hits, humidity's in the 60s, 50s to 70s.
Okay.
Yeah. So we can get really humid.
Cold enough.
So that definitely plays a big part. And so what about, like, what time of the year for you do temperatures drop? I'm laughing,
right
by the
about
way,
now.
because Nathan just he texted me a picture if he's watching he's watching Utah.
So if you don't see, I'm wearing my Utah Utes shirt. There's only one time that I wear that
On game day.
During a Utes
We're
game.
recording on a Saturday night.
I'm definitely watching the Utes game while we record, but I am fully here with you guys. Easy to do that when my Utes are kicking San Diego State's ass 35-0 currently. So, anyways.
Oh, geez, they are crushing them.
Yep. It's a little embarrassing. We had a blowout game last week too, so we're just waiting for our Pac-12.
Go football!
Yep, foosball. It's for the devil.
What does it look like in Utah for you? Did we talk about that?
So Utah, a little bit, yeah. So right around September, it starts cooling down a little bit. So late August, September is when I do my drought, and then start feeding heavy in September. Pairings generally start, or intros, I should say, generally start mid-October. So I'm planning this year to start doing some intro stuff right around the weekend after Tinley. Cool. So second week of October, something like that.
Fall is typically the for most of the country, it seems like, hatching season and breeding season generally happens within the fall. But like I said, breed ticks can breed year round. And you can definitely induce clutches just from feeding. I think that's actually very popular with like keeping an ambient. When you have a controlled environment year round and it's the same, I mean, you definitely can do that. I always, like, if you're keeping super dwarf animals in pure Superdorf localities, Kalatoas, things like that, you have to be very careful about solely allowing food to be what you use to breed, because it does not take a lot to overfeed your animal one season, and then they don't go off of food, and you've been power feed. They don't go off of food and decide not to breed that season, and you've been hitting them extremely hard for 3-4 months with food, and now you got a sausage link that you got to decide if you're going to cut food back or keep pushing to breed. And then that's when, like, sometimes the breeding envy and the kind of selfishness in us is like, let's just keep feeding and eventually they'll lay eggs. So just be careful with that, because that can be a slippery slope for the Superdorf stuff by overfeeding, because this is...
Don't let your pride get in the way. You want healthy animals in the end of the day. Do you really need an unhealthy animal to try to push for eggs? That's not the kind of keeping that we should be promoting.
Yeah,
so,
I mean...
in my opinion, I think if you're not getting an animal to back off food, off food.
Yeah, it's not time. And again, these snakes are going to tell you when they are ready. They're going to go when they go, no matter what, because retics have gone with like minimal calories and they already look super skinny and don't look ready to breed. And all of a sudden they're off of food. Yep. And they're, you got to remember, in the wild, they're a lot more lean than what we're used to seeing in captivity. So they can definitely breed lean. So just, be very cautious of that. This is just a personal opinion that I'll make public, and anybody who, any of the breeders that disagree with me can let me know. I'm fine with that. Drop a comment, like, subscribe. But I personally think that, Superdorfs have had a history of not being good breeders, for many reasons. And no one's really, it's not a factual thing on why, but I think a lot of reason why a lot of Superdorfs in the past have gotten egg bound and have struggled with having fertile and really good healthy clutches, like you see in mainlands that, the community has down to nearly a science now. I think a lot of those animals originally were fed like they were mainlands, and a lot of them were just overweight, and weren't having good clutches. Remember, thousands of years of evolution and a lack of food source is why these quote unquote Superdorf exist. And so to go against what their evolution has contributed and what's led to their existence of these smaller animals by just pounding them with food and getting them thicker and bigger is kind of going against like their whole like genetics, right? I mean, I'm not a scientist by any means. This is bro science that I'm talking about, and just like a theory. So don't take this as cold hard science. This is just me sharing what.
But it is an important thing to think about.
Exactly. It's just one of those factors. You have these animals through evolution with minimal food on an island, and that's caused them to shrink down. And so we have them in captivity, and we can choose to reverse evolution. So to say, it would take thousands of years to probably get them back into really big animals. But, if evolution can shrink down the animals with a lack of food because they were isolated on small islands for whatever Pangea or whatever theory you want to believe in, or the ocean swept them there, we can or storms. Yeah, we can certainly do the opposite over the same span of time. We obviously probably won't ever get to that point, but nonetheless, these animals have been able to exist and thrive off of less food. Therefore, I don't think the solution to getting them to breed is to have chunky Superdorfs.
Yeah. Fat snakes, I've seen kill a snake before. I mean, you're just going to look at health issues just like you would a human.
Yeah. And again, I'm speaking solely on the Superdorf islands, those localities. Because, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's obesity in mainland animals. I think there's been...
Yeah, I was gonna say you get a fat mainland, you get the same thing.
But I've
see it all the time, honestly, and it's sad.
But I've also seen some really big mainlands push out, 50 eggs year after year, and and again, I think science has a lot to catch up on the differences between these smaller islands and these larger islands. And I don't think that using food solely to get your super dwarf islands, your Kalatoa, Madus, Karampas, and even your Coyotes are is a safe, good way to get your snake to breed. So that's why it's important for you guys to just be aware of what your weather is like in your area and use nature outside to help you.
At least not in what we've seen, right? So, I mean, we've seen big animals produce clutches where there's no veins, they have hard time developing calcium. It's just one thing after another, and then you'll see a nice lean but toned animal push out a nice set of pearly white eggs and handle well. I know when you slimmed down your Kalatoa and got her to a nice tone, you had a lot higher success rate as far as the healthy eggs that came from her, what was candling well, how they were developing. So
yeah, I got her to cut down 7 pounds from the time that I received her and then had that very first clutch.
For a Kalatoa animal, 7 pounds is huge.
Yeah, she's like 9.5 feet. And yeah, so to get her to cut down a good amount and and just like to be fully transparent, the 7 pounds that I got her to cut down, both times that I weighed her when I got her and throughout. So when I got her, I weighed her with me getting on a scale and then holding her, right? So not the most accurate representation, but then me a year, prior to her breeding her second year, me getting on the scale, getting my weight, and we won't talk about my weight, and then holding her, there was a 6. I think I called it 7. I can go back in my records if I need to. I'm going to say 7 pounds, but it was like 6.7 or something like that. So yeah, I got her to reduce and her fertility rate was better. She never had egg bound issues either of those years. But yeah, I mean, it did work better the second year off the bat. So take that for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, could just be luck of the draw, but in my opinion, I think it has a lot to do with the health of the animal. That's just my opinion, though.
All right. I think this was a good discussion. You got anything else you want to touch on?
No, man. We went through all of our pairings, even though we don't have a ton going on. We have a handful of some fun stuff going on. I know it's kind of a stray from what we usually do on the Retic Lounge, but figured we'd give you guys a little bit of insight since we're still in our first handful of years into pairing these animals and trying to be successful at breeding. So just wanted to have you guys along with the ride.
And at the very least, I feel like there was some good informative information in there that you guys can take for what it is. How I would recommend you guys take the information that we're providing is put it in a bank of information that you get, and then also seek guidance from other people and use the group of information you get from us, from other breeders, from your mentors, whoever that is, and start to formulate your own theories and start to work on taking pieces that you see fit your narrative to have a successful experience. I mean, that's what I've done, and it's worked out so far. I mean, I've had, several mentors over the last 4.5 years, and I don't do anything. Yeah, I don't do anything exactly how one of those mentors does it. I took the information from all of them, and I kind of just have made up my own thing. So take our information for what it is, what it's worth to you, and go seek second, third, fourth, fifth opinions. And if what you guys are observing is working for you on what we have said here, use it. If it's not, that's totally okay.
Absolutely. Remember, everyone, support USARK. Go ahead, like, comment, subscribe on the YouTube videos. If you're listening on an audio platform, make sure to subscribe and rate the podcast. As well, we have our Discord and Patreon community. Discord is available for any of the tier levels as well. We have some extras for some of the higher tier levels, just behind the scenes kind of stuff, and just a little bit more access to what Lucas and I are doing. So join us over there at Patreon, the Retic Lounge.
Right now we are. I'm sorry. I wanted to. So everyone who has joined our Patreon, can't thank you enough. We're going to be working on getting a slide to thank all of our Patreons so that you guys are on at the end of each episode and your names are there. But we're recording September 17th. I think we launched like 5 or 6 weeks ago, and we're already up to 23 Patreons. And so for all of you that are supporting us, you guys are we can't thank you enough. We are talking daily, nearly every day, on how we can continue to improve it and make your support for us worth it. And
we have a lot of cool members on there that are anywhere from owning Retics for a handful of years to just barely getting their first super dwarf, and the conversations on there have been great. So I've just been blown away with how the community has grown just within the month and a half, 2 months that we've been launched.
So on that, you guys have a good night, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time you're listening to this. We'll catch you on our next episode of See Ya.